what I know is that it didn't start as Holotronics.
It was called Get Crunk Now.
Get Crunk Now. So that's how TaxLo kind of became the spin-off of Taxidermy Lodge. Again, this was not impressive number-wise for someone like Rod, who at the time was playing weekends to hundreds of people.
Mm-hmm.
But it was impressive to him in seeing a new group of people being interested in this music. Wes and his friends had a fight club, like an IRL fight club, because he was a knucklehead. They were all knuckleheads. So there were these various kind of like subcultural groups that were kind of meeting and interfacing with each other and kind of growing the overall, audience for what became kind of the new dance music.
Yeah.
Hey there, it's me, Roxy Cottontail. You might know me as a DJ, artist, designer, and New York City party promoter, or from my bunny logo. I'm putting all that on the table and writing about the years that transformed music and the New York City scene. I've interviewed 250 friends and colleagues I admire. I ask all and reveal all. Please join me in the tales to rediscover the 90s and the Y2K magical landscape of music, art, technology, and streetwear. This is Roxy's Tales.
I know you as Cullen Stalin, but do you want to introduce yourself for the record?
Cullen Nowakowski is my legal name. Cullen Stalin was almost a bit of an in-joke initially, because I had a username I was on message boards, and I had a username Islamic Stalin, which was intentionally kind of, trolly, especially, in the political era we were in at the turn of the millennium.
My guest this week on Roxy's Tales is the infamous Cullen Stalin, a true architect of Baltimore nightlife. From the legendary TaxLo parties to the iconic No Rule Mondays, Cullen helped define the raw energy of the indie sleaze, disco punk, and bloghouse era that shaped Y2K underground culture. Alongside longtime collaborator Josh Sisk, he created spaces where music, fashion, art, and absolute chaos collided in the most beautiful way possible. For over 2 decades, his influence has echoed far beyond Baltimore dance floors. Without further ado, Cullen.
My background in terms of music was punk and noise, but I was always into everything. But in terms of stuff that I had been actively involved in, I had toured a little bit in the 90s with a group called Suppression, played shows with Charles Bronson, Man is the Bastard, Los Crudos, stuff like that. I just kind of ended up DJing like parties and stuff after I graduated college. I did radio DJing in college. I never particularly expected to be a party DJ because I didn't think I grew up in Philly. So I grew up listening to Philly radio, Philly mix DJs, going to parties with people like Cosmo, Baker, Rich Medina, Major Taylor, a dude named Ralph, who was also part of the punk scene. They were all like really, really skilled, highly technically skilled, as well as really good at rocking a party. I was like, I have good taste, but I don't know if I could ever be like that. So I don't want to put myself on that, on that level. Like, I don't want to crowd out real DJs. There was this beginning to be this like real interest among like indie and punk people to want to have dance parties around that time, like in 2000s-ish or whatever, and punk festivals were starting to have like DJs do after parties. People were starting to explore more of the sort of family tree of punk. Napster had taken off, things like that. So it was easier to be exposed to these things that were sort of rare, it was always $30, $40 on the wall. Now people could have it on their iPod and listen to it, on their phone and listen to it. I started to play out a little bit just for fun. People were like asking, hey, Cullen, and so because some people knew me from the message board.
What message boards are you referring to?
There were a few. Trackstar was one. That was a Philly-based one that was a spin-off of Trackstar Records, which was an example of this, where they were hardcore and punk, but then they started getting into post-punk, new wave, no wave, that kind of stuff. There was Makeout Club, with the which actually is honestly very important to the story too, because there was this dude named Gibby who ran it, who started throwing a party in Boston called Start, and he was the guy who started Makeout Club.
Okay.
And so then there was also a kind of a spin-off, almost copycat site of Makeout Club called Lipstick and Cigarettes. And then also there was punkrock.net, which then became like punkforum.com, and it went through all these different things. But these were especially, again, there was a lot of people in Philly and Jersey. And so there was a lot of, these days it would be called, being an influencer or something like that. But at the time, there were certain people who, if they posted, oh, this thing's going to happen, 30 people would all go. Now that's not, a huge number compared to 1,000, but it's a huge number when you're just sort of starting something and you're doing things in small places and you're kind of trying to demonstrate that this even makes sense. Because while it was a kind of a punk scene, convincing the venues that it made sense, like, what, you're gonna bring turntables and play records? Like, we've got a jukebox. Like, so if you had 30 people with no promo, and especially if they go crazy at the bar, and especially on a weeknight, it helps start to give credibility to, to what was going on. Again, this is very early. This is 2000, 2001.
When did Crucial come about?
That was a later iteration of punkrock.net.
Ah, okay, cool. And so at this time you were living in Philly?
No, I moved, I graduated college at the beginning of 99, because I had I graduated off semester, and I was in Philly for 99, and then I moved to Baltimore.
Okay.
So, but it was so hard to cut the umbilical cord. I was going to Philly all the time.
Yeah. What was your first event DJing out? I mean, house parties or? Well,
so as I mentioned, I had been involved in like noise and punk and stuff like that. And I was involved with this electronic music stuff in Philly, in West Philly, at venues like the Kill Time and Stalag 13 and Fake House. And we called the parties Ultimatum.
I love the name.
And they were very broad electronics. So I was always this very eclectic person, and I always had these dreams that, like, if we get this segment of this audience and this segment of this audience and this segment of this audience, we can put something together and make something new. So we did these parties that had breakcore and noise and like IDM and electro stuff. So I had done a few of those parties in West Philly, probably in the late 90s, and then moving into this time. So I had turntables, I had like a Radio Shack mixer or something like that. So I had kind of the gear, and that was honestly part of what got you gigs at the time, was just having the gear. So then I kind of started playing some house parties, basement parties and stuff just for fun. And then it was actually through, kind of through those message boards that I got asked to do a party at Silk City. And I started doing that with Sean Agnew, who's a promoter, was at the time, again, one of these people who was coming from the punk scene, coming from the hardcore scene, but branching out a lot. So we started doing a party at Silk City. And then we would kind of try to appeal to the message board crowd. Silk City was very important also at this time in both a positive and negative way, because it became sort of the beginning and end of a lot of where like nightlife culture was for a lot of people. They had a great calendar full of DJs, and a lot of the people in this scene, that's all they wanted. They just wanted to spin at Silk City. So I was living in Baltimore, but I was DJing all the time in Philly, and then like in Jersey and stuff like that. And then there started to be a party in Baltimore that was started by some friends of mine who were like bartenders at this club that was owned by DJ Lovegrove, who was a house DJ.
Mm-hmm.
But they had a dead night on Mondays. And so they just basically said to the bartender, look, call your friends up, have your friends bring some records, see what happens. It was like 6 DJs. And it's just like, look, just play half an hour each. Each of you bring 10 people, you know, we'll blow it up. And that is what happened. You know, it just by throwing a bunch of people at it and kind of having free reign of this bar. It's a Monday night, you know, and so it became like this hip spot. I was not part of that initial group, but very soon I got recruited.
Okay.
And I was still pretty rusty at like, you know, the technical stuff, but the premise initially was that this was going to be like a rock oriented party, or like rock and funk and stuff like that. So I just kind of brought my funkiest rock record.
Do you remember the name of the venue?
Yeah, it was called Good Love Bar. So basically I was asked to become a permanent DJ on there. And that party was called Taxidermy Lodge. Was
that like your first residency, I guess?
Well, the first one was the Silk City one.
Oh, okay, yeah. So,
and that's also becomes important for a couple reasons. So I started getting like guests, and I started kind of going to some of the people that I liked and respected, and that, you know, I was getting to know better and stuff like that. So Major Taylor, again, being a really important one. It didn't hurt that he lived right around the corner from Silk City. You know, he had introduced me maybe a year or two previous to someone who was kind of under his wing, named Low Budget. And so then I had Low Budget guests, you know, and I started kind of just like, you know, developing these friendly relationships with a lot of Philly DJs. And this eclectic dance floor kind of sound was starting to develop around this time. And where it was okay to play Talking Heads and then Buju Banton and then DMX or something like that, you know. There were other people doing this too. Let's see, Andrew Jeffrey Wright, Mr. Ten Fingers. So a lot of people who were involved in Space 1020. Right, yeah. Space 1026. And also kind of simultaneous, one of the people who I had done those electronic music parties with, this dude named Josh, he started a electro clash type night at Silk City called High Scores. And almost exactly at the same time, Dave P was starting a party called Click.
Oh, yeah. That was Fluid, right?
And that was at Fluid.
Yeah.
And he was coming from a different angle, but he was also, I'd say, very key in sort of broadening sort of the musical interest of the scene that he was in, because he was doing a primarily Britpop oriented party at the time called Making Time. Mm-hmm. And then he was like, okay, you trust me to do these parties, so I'm going to do a different type of party, and it's going to be at a dance club, and you're still going to come because you trust me. And then, but then he brought in Andrew Jeffrey Wright, who did the flyer design initially, Julian, who was in a band called S Process. Julian S Process was his DJ name. So unfortunately, Josh was a very conceptual person, but he didn't have the pull, and basically the scene really couldn't accommodate 2 parties like this. So it was not long lasting. However, the other person who was part of that initial group was this woman named Lily, who was Lily Frisco, who was from Florida and lived in Philly. She and Josh were at this house party I was playing in South Philly, and it was off the chart. I played for like 6 hours. I went through like every style of music. I had just gotten like all these like 80s records recently, and I was just like running through them. And I was like, okay, I actually have a good ear for this. I'm starting to, kind of get the hang of it. Lily was very impressed. I got invited to do this first high scores event from, both Josh being my friend, and then, Lily being very impressed with my selection. Time comes for the second high scores party, and I'm thinking that I'm like a sort of a permanent guest or whatever, and I'm told that no, I'm not. It was just like a one-off, or maybe sometimes or whatever, but that this guy named Wes is gonna DJ this one. So that was the second high scores party, but the first one at Silk City. And yes, the person was Wesley Pence, who was recently returned from studying in Japan.
And that was 2002.
So I'm guessing this is 2002, but again, it was the beginning of whichever year it was.
Yeah.
I started pulling some of these folks from the Philly scene to come and play with me in Baltimore. So there was, I'm not sure about how long it was happening at the Good Love. The Taxidermy Lodge party was happening at the Good Love, but eventually there was a fire, and it shut the venue down. And already kind of some of the initial people were starting to become kind of sick of it. They liked it as kind of a lark, but like, honestly, it's not that easy to DJ week after week, like, especially like you have to stay interested in music, and also interested in doing different things with your selection and stuff like that. So that kind of already was happening. And then there was this fire, and there was a venue and a venue owner named Dan, who had run this club called the Talking Head Club that was a little bit outside of the city. And he was moving it to the former location of the rock club, the Auto Bar, which had just moved to a bigger location. So that became the new home for the Taxidermy Lodge party. And I started bringing in like these Philly DJs, because I basically would have like 1 or 2 weeks where I kind of got to curate. And so I'd bring Major Taylor and Low Budget, 10 Fingers and stuff like that. And this is where kind of things started to really bubble, because more and more people were accepting of this more eclectic kind of approach to music. Not to say it didn't ruffle feathers, because it definitely ruffled some more rockist people. It definitely ruffled their feathers. And Baltimore is a very rockist city, which definitely overlaps with racism and certain dynamics, around who gets to kind of control culture here, especially at the time, who runs the venues, but this was kind of a wedge. This started to be a bit of a wedge to like open things up. Again, this combination of, these sort of local influencers, nothing else, there kind of being nothing else to do because it was on a Monday, and the party just started blowing up. Honestly, it didn't need someone like LOB or someone to come in, but then they would come in and they would just take it to a whole other level, because like we were all playing eclectic music, but they were blending it. They were making something new out of it. And really the first person I ever heard do that was Major Taylor, Ralph, but Low B was right there too, Cosmo, 10 Fingers. They were all doing it to some extent. And it was amazing because you could see what people could do. They could take these Billy Squier records that, oh yeah, I'm into rock music, and then turn it into something danceable And so it really created an explosive sort of scene. It was still kind of small though, but there's another venue run by an old rave guy, this guy named Lonnie Fisher. And he had done this party called Starscape. You know, he had done other parties that I'm forgetting the name of it right now. But, you know, he had been running a primarily dance music oriented venue called Sonar. And that was initially close to where the Good Love bar was. He moved Sonar to a larger venue. And that venue was right around the corner from the Talking Head Club. And he was, yes, he was into electronic music and people being skilled DJs, but he also saw a level of excitement on a Monday night that was undeniable. And he's like, what if we did this on a Friday night at a proper club? So that's how TaxLo kind of became the spin-off of Taxidermy Lodge. It was kind of just a branding thing. It was a little bit easier to market to just use this 2-syllable TaxLo. And we started to just basically refer to the Friday party at the proper club as TaxLo. The Monday party especially was like, people were so fucking like just amped in general. You could be experimental. You know, you could try your stuff there and really test it out. And, you know, I know for a long time, I would be very impressed. I'd come up to Philly on the weekends and I'd be like, oh my God, the scene is so good. DJs are so good. There's so much happening. But then in turn, the DJs would be like so excited to just be able to really let loose. So it became this kind of mutual thing where these people enjoyed playing in Baltimore, and I loved having them in Baltimore because their skill level was well above anybody in that scene. Now, this is before I met Scottie B. This is before I met Techniques or Rod or any of those people. You know, because there was very much like a racial like wall, you know, in the scene, in the city, in the music culture. And it was something I definitely identified and was trying to figure out how to, like, just for myself, like what I could do about it. But it was still very much the situation at the time. So for the most part, you know, a lot of these people had never seen a real Baltimore club DJ, except that guy, Jason Urich, who was one of the co-founders of the Taxidermy Lodge party. He had a record store. It was called Once Twice Sound.
Okay.
And he did an annual electronic event called the Once Twice Sound Festival or Once Twice Festival or something like that. He had Rod Lee play at his store.
Cool.
So this was around the same time, like, you know, 2003-ish. It was like 40, 21-year-old white kids, like white indie kids. Now, again, this was not impressive number-wise for someone like Rod, who at the time was playing weekends to hundreds of people.
Mm-hmm.
But it was impressive to him in seeing a new group of people being interested in this music. And this happened kind of again and again because then Jason Urich, he booked K Swift very soon around that time as well. And to play at this DIY venue. And, you know, again, it was like, now that one was a lot bigger. That was like 500 people, but K Swift was playing to thousands of people on a weekend. But nonetheless, she saw this and she was impressed at this potential boundary crossing that was happening at the time. That became part, and, you know, this is as time went on a little bit, part of what I tried to do, which is actually, as people are listening to this music and getting open-minded to this sound, I'm in Baltimore. I'm going to have Baltimore DJs play this party. As the holler board starts to happen and people start to have access to it, and you start to have people in Indiana and, you know, stuff like that, making demos of this stuff, and they're trying to tour and play gigs already. And it's like, I was very resistant to that. I'm like, I'm in Baltimore. I'm going to have the real people play this stuff and show people what it's about, and also show them like how cool these parties are. And then I also, I was going to there was still a lot of club music oriented record shops and sort of cultural areas at the time. So I was taking flyers to those places as well. So I was trying to actively go out of my bubble to start to bring, more and more types of people into the party, especially the Friday party at Sonar.
And was that like the only events you were doing at that time? Or were you taking like gigs elsewhere, like to Philly too?
Yeah, I mean, I was never and have never been like the most skilled DJ, although I definitely improved quite a bit. But at this time, I wasn't trying to compete with Philly DJs.
Yeah.
I wasn't trying to embarrass myself in front of these people who even though some of them are like the same age or only a little bit older, like I very much admired them, and like I didn't want to insult them. But I mean, because this network was happening. So this network was still going on of these message boards, and sort of post makeout club and stuff like that. So yeah, there were parties that I was asked to DJ, and that's how I met people like Lauren Flax. So Lauren Flax, she was based in Detroit. She was a Detroit like electronic music DJ. So there were these various kind of like subcultural groups that were kind of meeting and interfacing with each other and kind of growing the overall, audience for what became kind of the new dance music.
Yeah. Do you know when Hollertronics started at the Yuki?
Well, so what I know is that it didn't start as Hollertronics.
It was called Get Crunk Now.
Get Crunk Now.
Yeah.
Yes. So Wes and his friends had a fight club, like an IRL fight club, because he was a knucklehead. They were all knuckleheads.
Wait, so they had a real life fight club?
Yeah. And it wasn't like brutal, but it was like, they would just go out and they'd be, at an event or something, they'd start shoving each other. And so they went to some event that Lily was playing at, and started doing their thing of fighting each other. The bouncer tried to intercede, and then the bouncer started basically becoming an unwilling participant in it.
God.
So they got bounced and told that they could never come back. So, West had been trying at Silk City. This is, by the way, this is why it was a stunt, like 20 years later, to name the project Silk City. Like this goes back to that.
Oh, I see.
But Wes could not put on an event at Silk City. And so that sort of led to the seeking out of other venues, of alternate venues. And so that's how the Yuki Club started. And so that was a Ukrainian hall, like and literally, old Ukrainian neighborhood people would go there and stuff, but it was available for rent.
So I'm assume around this time is when we met. Do you know how we met? I mean, I guess we probably met on the holler board.
Yeah,
or on Crucial maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, like if we physically met first or online met first. I mean, it was definitely a little while later. I remember you did a Hollertronics party in New York. Mm-hmm. That was like in a basement.
Yeah, John Street. That was the first one that was November 2003.
Yeah, so I know I attended that. Yeah. So I know I met you there, but I might have known.
No, but I think I met you. Well, I mean, I knew of your name preceded yourself on Crucial. Probably, Jason Musson, who put me onto that board, probably had said Cullen's the man or something to that extent.
Right. Yeah. Also around this time, so 2004. I'm working on opening up a bookstore cafe with some other co-political people. And the idea is to have this like, leftist social space and stuff like that. And it was in Mount Vernon, Baltimore. Across the street, literally like right on the opposite corner, was Chris Devlin, who was DJing for a rapper called Spank Rock. I hadn't kind of known him, and then all of a sudden, like he became huge in Baltimore, like almost overnight, it seemed to me. And he also was signed to Big Dada.
Oh, I didn't know that, I don't think.
Yeah.
And assigned as a producer or what?
No, it was him and Alex.
Yes.
Him and Alex were signed as a group.
Yes, I knew that.
But the group already was bigger than those two, because Alex was from Baltimore, but he was living in New York, and he was doing other production. I think he was working with James Murphy at the time or something.
Mm-hmm.
But Chris Devlin, who was DJing for them, and he had a co-DJ named Ronnie Darko. He is of a similar politics to me, and also was right across the street. So he started coming into Red Emma's. Then he started coming to the Taxidermy Lodge party, and we became friends. You know, at some point, Spank Rock played a Holotronics party.
Yeah.
And then we started to become friends, and then, you know, the crew got bigger.
Like, because I remember meeting Naeem on the dance floor of Holotronics, but he had not. I don't know. He told me he made music, but I mean, he eventually like played it for me. And I think the first time that he played in New York was one of my parties.
Yeah, and the first single. Now, my understanding is that Naeem actually had like a deal with Rawkus or something at some point. Like he was on the indie track. There was a single, and I don't think Ninja Tune put it out, called "Put That Pussy on Me." I think Turntable Lab put it out.
Yes.
So Turntable Lab becomes another part of this, right? Because they had actually put out the first Diplodocus 12-inch.
I have that one too. Was that for Thingamajon?
Yes. Yeah, so the Put the Pussy on Me had two versions, and one was a low budget remix and one was a Diplo remix. And the Diplo remix just was like over top a sample of Can't Seem to Make You Mine by the Seeds, which is like a 60s psychedelic record. And that was perfect. Like that was perfect for the type of party that I was playing, because it hooks you with this rock sample, but then it's a club song.
What is the song that is sampled?
The Diplo mix is Can't Seem to Make You Mine by the Seeds.
Okay. And so your role with TaxLo in Baltimore, you were one of the curators and DJs.
Yeah, it started off that I was just, I was a DJ, I was a resident DJ, and that it was run by this guy, Justin, who had been the bartender, but he was also a photographer. He was studying graphic design. So he kind of had all these skills that were helpful to sort of getting a party started. He kind of pieced out of the Monday thing. And then as the Fridays started to develop and become viable as like, and marketable, we were both the ones who were like, who really saw this is like the start of like a thing, like something, like the scene is changing and it's growing, and we can help make that happen, and we can make Baltimore a place where like, people respect it as a musical place for this new sound and stuff like that. And so we kind of took over booking and scheduling and promotion and all that, in kind of short order.
How long did TaxLo go on?
So it went on in some form or another until about like, I want to say 2012 or something, like as a brand that does events.
Yeah.
But as a weekly party, let alone 2 weekly parties, it ended around 2008, which was kind of this irony of like, at the time when this sound is beginning to become like international and understood as like this huge scene, that the TaxLo party as like a weekly party was becoming less reliable. It was almost too populist in some ways, that like the sort of the scene intelligentsia kind of were like not as keen on it anymore. As far as a weekly, now it became a brand, and for the next couple years there was major awesome events under that brand, but it was no longer the sort of like reliable, I go to it every week.
Who else was booked on in the weekly times?
So, I mean, definitely, you know, Spank Rock became a regular, Amanda Blank, you know, like I said, Scottie B, Rod Lee, Debonair Samir, you know, we would have the club DJs, Boom Man.
Matt and Kim, Dan Deacon,
Matt and Kim for sure. Dan Deacon was towards that end when we started becoming like a brand rather than every week. But Dan had actually, you know, he was not from Baltimore, but he went to school at SUNY, and a whole bunch of people kind of from his scene moved to Baltimore at the same time. This became the Wham City crew. And Dan bar-backed at the Talking Head Club, which was the club where we did the Monday parties.
Okay.
So, you know, he, and then, you know, some other people started to coalesce around this kind of art rock scene. And, you know, now probably the most prominent group from that is Future Islands. Okay. You know, came from that. They came from North Carolina. I was one of the first people to like book them like at a party, like at an event, because they were doing these kind of like small DIY rock shows and stuff like that. And I had seen them and I was just like, oh yeah, definitely want to book them. You know, there's all types of connections that happen because right around this time, you know, Wes needed, he basically needed someone to help him out like on some gigs and stuff like that. So I started tour managing him. He also had just been, you know, he had A&R'd this group Banje de Hole from Brazil. So I tour managed them. I think I booked Death Set to play with Banje de Hole. Then Gorky, who was their DJ, like remixed one of their tracks. And, you know, then they started talking, and then Sam Hunt, who worked for the Windish agency, was booking Diplo, and I was like, hey, there's this band, the Death Set, you should check them out. Then they ended up doing a tour together, Banje de Hole and the Death Set.
Oh, nice. Do you feel like 9/11 changed anything in Philly and Baltimore?
I think a level of sort of fuck it was unlocked, to be honest. There was almost like if the 90s and the sort of the end of the Clinton era was like very sort of unrealistically optimistic because of the tech bubble and everything, and people getting ridiculous jobs for like crazy money for doing nothing, working in the ad industry and marketing. I mean, think about like Vice, you know, starting at the time and how much that fed into it, right? Like you had all these jobs, but I think there was a sort of nihilism that fed, nihilism combined with a level of privilege that sort of like helped grease that party culture, you know, at the time before it kind of all, I don't know, this is a whole thesis or whatever, but like the end of the end of that first decade, things changed a lot. And who the scene was for and what it was about, I think changed a lot at the end of the decade too.
Go Cullen with the timeline. It's good. It's really good.
Thanks for hopping by. That's it for this week. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, comment, and stalk. Bounce, little kitty.